Hi everybody, welcome to our session today where we're going to reflect on producing the first solely non-English language resource in AM's programme, which is Mexico in History. So in this brief session today, we are going to give you a bit of history into the development of the collection, how it came to be, what we set out to achieve, and also what makes this collection unique, as well as trying to shine a light on some of the quite specific and unique challenges which were prompted by us when we were engaging with this material. The challenges are editorial challenges, but also technological in nature. Okay, and just getting on. So firstly, a little bit about us. I'm Louise Hemmings. I'm the Executive Director of Publishing at AM. So in my role, I'm responsible for the success of our publishing programme, content development and production, and our kind of editorial strategy and wider commercial strategy and partnerships with libraries.
And I'm Dr. Ben Lacey. I'm the Head of Engagement at AM. My team tend to look after libraries, faculty, students after they've made purchases and support them in making the most of the collections they've bought from us.
Okay, so I'm just going to start out with a little bit of an introduction to AM and also to Mexico in History as a resource. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with us, just wanted to take a moment to say who we are. We specialise in providing digital access to a huge range of primary source collections. We are driven by a mission to make significant historical archives widely accessible to students, educators and researchers all over the world. History comes alive when we connect with the past through authentic documents, whether they're letters, government records, or rare manuscripts. And our goal is to create pathways into history for people and institutions all over, whether a seasoned academic or a student approaching a primary source for the very first time. I am incredibly excited about Mexico in History. It did publish last year, so it isn't new for this programme. However, we are really excited to shine a bit of a light on Mexico in History because of the way it will open doors to a deeper understanding of Latin American history. And if I can just tell you a little bit more about the collection, it traces Mexico's journey from the early 1500s to 1929. And it spans major events like the era of Spanish colonization, Mexican War of Independence and the Revolution. It is predominantly Spanish language, and it features a stunning array of manuscripts, really beautiful photographs and printed works. They're all sourced from the incredible Bancroft Library at UC Berkeley, and we are beyond thrilled to partner with them on this project. So just to say, really, this was a real landmark for AM because it was our first non-English language collection. And so just to spend some time reflecting on why we see this as one of the most important resources for us in recent years. It explores that Mexico's history from the colonial period, and it really does bring in key collections which cover the Inquisition, the Christianization of Mexico, all the way through to religious missions. And in terms of the gestation of the collection, the resource was born from an idea to collaborate with the Bancroft Library to digitize selections from the very large Latin Americana collection. We knew that Spanish language and manuscript content could present quite a challenge for us in terms of selection of the material. We mitigated this largely through working really, really closely with the curator of those collections, who was also an editorial board member for us. He knows the collections inside out. He was able to support our suggestions and make recommendations on other material to digitize. And the result actually is that you've got a mix of popular, very well consulted collections from Bancroft, such as the Inquisition records, but you've also got a range of really fascinating but underutilized collections where really rich histories can be drawn out, printed collections of religious sermons, for instance, or collections on Indigenous languages and vocabularies. So one question I just want to kind of tackle straight up is, we've not translated the actual sources within this resource. Why didn't we do that? And the reason that we didn't do that is that there was very strong support for us not to do this. The faculty, the editorial board really wanted to encourage students to engage with the materials and translate them themselves. The translation tools don't pick up on historical context or nuances. And there was a really strong and kind of widespread support for contextual content to provide students with the tools and case studies. We have really rich case studies which offer insights into how to read and transcribe handwritten Spanish language primary sources, and also how to undertake translation on their own and the historical aspects that they should cover. And Ben's going to talk a little bit more about one of those case studies shortly. Why Spanish language content? We have questions from our customers all the time about, can we include more foreign language content? History is obviously international, and these materials will offer new perspectives and encourage students to really think about primary sources, where they come from, and how history isn't just recorded in their own language. With this resource, we really focus on providing Spanish language metadata and site content and essays, because we saw a massive opportunity to enable students to engage with the materials in the language they're most comfortable with. Spanish is obviously very widely spoken in the US, so actually including Spanish language essays, site content and metadata meant that students could really choose the language that they were most comfortable within. And I just was going to make a quick note to say this project was also produced during COVID, which presented some very significant challenges for us when it came to the assessment of the materials and just the speed at which we had to produce it, which was fairly unusual for us as well. So, going into some of the very unique challenges prompted by Mexico and history, our focus, as I've said, really was on privileging discoverability and provoking critical engagement with the sources. There was a greater demand really for increased searchability rather than translation, but there were numerous underlying challenges to achieving that. The first was the ingest of archival metadata. The Bancroft Library had catalogued the collections in a mixture of English and Spanish, depending on archival staff preferences, chosen approach at the time. Second of all, we wanted to provide this dual language metadata experience. I had to think really carefully about not having a really cluttered UX experience. We want the end user to see a clean interface. We don't want to overwhelm. And thirdly, with a great deal of translated metadata, we had to consider how, as an editorial team, we would cope with that and how that would fit with our existing processes. That was particularly critical for allowing us to produce it in a specific time frame, a tight time frame, as I've referred to, but also to ensure that we build in time to absorb that dual language metadata before other editorial processes get underway. And lastly, the search functionality we realised quite quickly needed to be improved. Our existing handwritten text recognition model was not as accurate as we wanted for really reliable transcription of Spanish language material. And in addition, our platform's existing search functionality didn't recognise diacritics and couldn't necessarily prioritise more than one title field, which kind of forced us to prioritise English titles over Spanish titles or vice versa. How did we tackle those challenges? This is a bit of a kind of canter through and a summary here. Firstly, we made really significant changes to our editorial processes. The presentation and ingest of archival metadata and site copy had to be finalised much sooner in order to allow for that translation workflow to happen. Essay contributions had to be completed and approved sooner to allow time for the author to translate their own work or for us to do that for them. And the creation of new workflows for this ingest vast amounts of translated metadata to really ensure we had time to match it accurately with those documents. And lastly, we relied on the creation of a new partnership with a translating company that we've not worked with before. That involved lots and lots of research to ensure that company, their methods, their standards were up to the kind of levels that we expected for our requirements.
So I'm going to take over at this point and talk a little bit about the presentation of metadata and search functionality. And I think that those do complement each other in terms of overcoming the challenges that Louise has articulated. So some of this is about technology, but it's also about cataloguing best practice and recognising where that has a bigger impact on discoverability than technology advances. So I'm going to look at some examples in the site itself in a second, but just to summarise those to start with, we chose to present key metadata fields in both Spanish and English. That introduced consistency between documents previously catalogued in one or the other. And it also gives people in the site equal access, regardless of whether they're using English or Spanish, to search the site and to discover content. Louise has said that we wanted to make sure there was clean presentation there, that we collaborated with a third-party supplier, and that we adapted how our search engine works. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a second when we're looking at the site. And the same with the handwritten text recognition tool as well. We also developed this search system that can recognise diacritics and special characters, but not necessarily need them to return results. And we want to make this accessible not just to people who are using Spanish, but to people who are using English and want to access the documents as well. I'm not a Spanish speaker myself. As a student, it wouldn't occur to me to necessarily use diacritics all the time. So being able to find results with diacritics was really important for us there. So if we come out of this briefly, and I'm going to show you some of what I've been talking about. This is the site that was made, Mexico in History, and I've pulled up a few documents that demonstrate some of this. So in the first place, I'm just going to zoom in on the document details so you can see what we're talking about when we're saying about the title field and the translated title, and the fact that we've done this for a few different metadata fields as well, like the collection, if there's a description of the metadata, we've been doing that as well. And when it comes to search results, all search engines will prioritize or give certain priority to some fields over other fields in order to weight the results. If you've got hundreds of search results being returned, the search engine needs a way to order them in terms of relevance. There was a real risk that our existing search engine would privilege either the English titles or the Spanish titles, so we kind of reworked the search engine in order to ensure that that didn't happen. So that was very important. I've also run a search. I said I wouldn't necessarily be confident about using diacritics in my search, so I might search for something like Española, but not put in the diacritics. Our search engine is able to pick that up, so I've done the search up in the search box here without a diacritic, but in the metadata, it has been picked up. And again, if I zoom into our full text handwritten recognition, that has also picked up with the diacritic, and it works both ways. So somebody using diacritics will get results where maybe the original author of the manuscript document hasn't put those in, so it kind of caters to spelling mistakes and things like that. I'll just stay on this slide for a second because of this is obviously a feature of the handwritten text recognition being highlighted here. So we mentioned increasing the accuracy. The retraining that we did using the documents from the Bancroft increased the accuracy by 11% for Spanish language material, but it also had a significant improvement in other languages as well. So French and English, for example, they also benefited, and our search results became more accurate for those languages as well as the Spanish material. So there's kind of wide-scale benefits to retraining the search algorithm in that way. So those were how we met some of the challenges that we were faced when kind of putting together this collection. In terms of why this is so important, Louise articulated some of this incredibly well at the start. From my perspective, I like to think about the end users, the students who are engaging with this material in particular. And you will often hear from me or others who work in special collections, in archives, in digitised primary sources, that the material we produce is really important for education. And we all believe that student interaction with these materials, when properly contextualised, can be a driving force for better educational outcomes and support employability. We have multiple studies now from institutions like the World Economic Forum, Business Insider and Harvard Business Review that show the most sought after skills among employers are things like analytical thinking, curiosity and critical thinking. And these skills are developed so well by people who are working with primary sources. I do think working with primary sources develops them in a way that other assignments that students are set just doesn't achieve. As a concrete example from this in Mexico in history, because you will hear people like me say this a lot, and we don't always provide concrete examples to come along with this. Translation is a great one. So in Mexico in history, one of our consultant editors did a case study of translating some letters from Spanish into English. And students can use that case study that's inbuilt into the site to see how he went about doing this. And one of the things he talks about is emotional nuance. He wanted to get the emotional feeling between the two correspondents to really come across in his translation. Now, I have no problem with a student who doesn't speak Spanish using a Spanish transcript and using an AI tool or Google Translate in order to get a sense of what the letter means. But I also think it is so important for them to understand that translation in a matter-of-fact way isn't everything, and that you need to understand the emotion and the nuance and the idioms that a writer was trying to convey when they were putting this together. I've always felt that using digitized primary sources offers an ability to kind of see through history and see what somebody was really trying to achieve with their writing. But I think even more so in today's world, where there are a lot of technologies that students are using, it gives people the opportunity to develop those critical thinking and analysis skills and develop a deeper understanding. We also hear regularly that universities want interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity in their programs. And again, I think collections like Mexico in history and the archives that they're drawn from have it embedded in them. They've always been interdisciplinary in their nature. A good example from the Bancroft is that a political science professor who specialises in looking at torture in Iraq and Afghanistan in the 21st century uses the Mexican Inquisition records because that was where the key kind of moral justifications or attempted justifications for interrogation were first formulated. And you can't really understand what happens in the 21st century without understanding how some of these things were kind of justified and the ethics were kind of put together around them. And finally, we know that universities, there is this need for non-English language material in research and teaching, and it's our responsibility not just to digitise this material, but also ensure that users can discover the content regardless of what language they're working in. We know that not all institutions have resourcing at the library or specialised faculty in these areas, so building support tools that means that students can access this material and make the most of it is also really important. And I think that allows us to deliver the value that these documents can really give to students.
Okay, so just concluding us out here really. For us, I think when we think about what Mexican history has brought, developing primary source resources in non-English languages does come with quite fresh and unique challenges. As publishers of primary source content, we have a responsibility to provide access to these sources and to ensure that researchers and students are able to uncover those riches of historical sources outside of English. We also recognise, as Ben was saying, that translation of the source itself is part of the critical engagement and contextualisation of historical sources. You know, for us, that kind of fundamental core of the added value we provide as the publisher of this content is about supporting teaching and research to open up direct scholarly inquiry. And actually, it's just really vital to balance the need to provide accessibility and tailored support, as Ben was referring to, alongside that desire to spark critical thinking and a sense of fresh discovery with historical sources. Different production strategies are going to be appropriate for for non-English language resources. Here, as you can see, it resulted in a significant emphasis on the underlying platform technologies, as well as kind of creativity and improvement of our editorial processes. And we learned really that it's a continual process of evolution and refinement, and I suspect the process will look quite different the next time we encounter similar types of materials. We are very proud to have been able to launch Mexican History last year. This project sets a really new standard for non-English language resources at AM. And I think more than anything for us, and particularly with some of the challenges I referred to with the timings and partnership with Bancroft and UC Berkeley, it's a clear demonstration of the value of collaboration with partners, investment in innovation and a commitment to diversity in academic publishing. So thanks everyone very much for joining us today. I believe we do have some time for some questions if anybody has any for us. Hello.
Do you plan to do this something similar for other countries in South and Central America?
Yeah, so certainly focusing on kind of building out our resources in that region is a core part of that strategy, actually. And so we have produced some collections on Latin American communities in the US, which has a slightly broader kind of remit, more contemporary material, but we do have plans in that direction as well. And as you can see, we've spent a lot of effort and investment really in kind of building out this capability. So it's absolutely the kind of future for us alongside that kind of core portfolio.
Which countries are your highest priority?
I think we have a whole range, actually. We know that there's a real appetite for historical resources on Brazil, Cuba as well, are probably two that I would pinpoint in particular. But we have a whole range of projects in the works, actually. So quite hard to narrow it down. And one of the things that we want to do, and often have to balance, is the need to kind of get that specific historical nature, that focus on the kind of a specific region with a sense of the kind of plurality of these histories and the comparative aspect as well. So that's something that we also try and bear in mind when we're developing projects.
And the date ranges?
And we work with anything from, as we've said, sort of 1500s right through to now, kind of born digital content. So we absolutely run the gamut of history.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.